Have you ever stared at like a massive mountain of research? Maybe you are prepping for a high-stakes presentation at work,
Hmm.
or maybe you are neck deep in a graduate degree and you just felt like an absolute imposter the second someone asks for your original insight.
Oh, totally. You have done the reading. You have taken all the meticulous
Right,
notes.
you put in the hours, but suddenly the spotlight shifts and you are expected to be the authority to synthesize all of this, and your brain just completely freezes up.
Yeah, and that freeze is actually a biological response to a radically different cognitive load. Consuming information feels neurologically safe. You're just absorbing what is already out there.
Right.
But producing knowledge, actually putting your own synthesized thoughts out into the world to be judged, that feels incredibly exposed.
So the risk assessment center of your brain just starts flashing red.
Exactly. It is a very vulnerable place to be because you are stepping away from the safety net of established consensus.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to figure out how we actually bridge that gap, how we stop freezing and start creating, we have to look at the fundamental difference between the mindset that gets you through school and, the mindset that actually produces new knowledge.
Hmm.
Today, we have some great sources for this deep dive, including insights from academic mentors, something called scholar transformation theory, and a definitive guide on the realities of academic supervision by Dr. Raymond Toga.
Yeah, these sources are fantastic because, for our entire lives, from kindergarten through undergrad, and even in most corporate training, we are really conditioned into what our sources call the student mindset.
Right, which is entirely built around a proving paradigm.
Exactly. Think about the architecture of a standard education or training environment.
Yeah, it is all about tests and grades.
Yes, the structure is built around you, showing the assessors that you have met their pre-established learning outcomes. You write essays or take multiple choice tests specifically to prove that you did the reading.
Right, you are just hunting for the right answers. And those answers already exist in a rubric somewhere. It is like painting by numbers, right?
That is a great analogy.
You are given the canvas, you're given the exact colors to use, and success is defined purely by your ability to stay inside the lines that someone else drew. But the researcher mindset, that requires you to mix your own pigments.
Right. You have to understand the chemistry of the colors themselves. You are no longer just absorbing knowledge to prove you were paying attention. The dynamic completely flips.
Yeah.
You actually become the teacher.
The teacher. Wow. So the academic community or your senior bosses, they actually want to learn from you because you're discovering something new.
Exactly. But the friction happens because people try to mix their own pigments while still, looking over their shoulder for the instruction manual. You see this constantly.
Oh, for sure.
The sources highlight that students who are trapped in that student mindset will often write these massive discussion sections in their papers that barely even mention their own findings.
Wait, really? They just ignore their own work?
Basically, yeah. They hide behind endless literature reviews. They essentially skip over their own original results so they can get back to quoting other, quote-unquote, safer authorities who have already been published.
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second. Let's say you are a 20-something graduate student or, I don't know, a junior analyst at a firm. Isn't it a little bit arrogant to walk into a room and assume you know more than a seasoned professor or a senior executive who has been in the field for 30 years?
Well, no, because
I mean, if you were painting your own picture, how do you overcome the glaring reality that they have painted hundreds of pictures before you?
Well, what is fascinating here is that it all comes down to the math of specialization. You aren't claiming to know more about everything, right? You are claiming authority over a highly curated, hyper-specific domain.
Okay, give me an example.
So the sources use a brilliant example to illustrate this mechanism.
Yeah.
If you decide your research topic is, say, the overall effectiveness of therapy, then yes, you will be crushed by imposter syndrome.
Because there are thousands of people who know more than you about that broad topic.
Exactly. But if you choose an incredibly narrow research question, say the effectiveness of compassion-focused therapy for health anxiety, well, you mathematically limit the number of experts on the planet.
Wait, but doesn't going that hyper niche make your research irrelevant to the wider world? Like, if you zoom in that far, you are shrinking the pool of people who even care about the topic, aren't you?
Not at all, actually, because that hyperniche data acts as a puzzle piece for the broader field. By narrowing your focus to something that specific, you curate evidence that nobody else has the time or resources to gather.
Oh, I see. So suddenly, you genuinely are the leading authority on that exact tiny slice of reality.
Yes. So when those incredibly busy examiners or senior managers sit down to read your work, they aren't looking at your broader life experience. They are looking at your carefully curated evidence.
Because they genuinely want to learn your specific findings to inform their larger worldview. That
Yeah,
actually entirely rewires how you look at imposter syndrome.
it really does, yeah.
You aren't pretending to be a master of the universe. You are just the absolute master of one very specific data set. But that leads to the obvious question, right? How does a human brain actually rewire itself to stop painting by numbers? Like, at what point does a passive consumer transform into an active producer?
Well, to understand that cognitive shift, we look to scholar transformation theory, or STT. This was formulated in 2020 by researchers Welsh, Ellington, Shockley, and Prime.
Okay, SDT. Got it.
Yeah, they developed this model specifically to map out how the brain combats cognitive passivity, which is that deeply ingrained habit of just waiting to be told what is true. They break this evolution down into a continuum of 5 phases.
5 phases, okay. But we can probably skip past the early phases because most people listening are already way beyond them, right?
Right, the early phases are just being a passive information gatherer where you wait for a syllabus, or an active information gatherer where you fall down a Wikipedia rabbit hole but don't really do anything with the information.
Yeah, I think we all know what late-night doom scrolling feels like.
Precisely. The real psychological friction starts at phase 3, which is becoming an active knowledge gatherer.
Oh, notice the shift there from information to knowledge.
Exactly. This is where the brain starts organizing. You categorize, you start spotting connections, and you build frameworks out of the raw data.
But organizing data is still just organizing someone else's thoughts, right? You are building a very neat and tidy filing cabinet, but you still haven't produced anything new. So what does this all mean for the actual transition? At what exact point does gathering transform into producing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the leap requires a shift in how you assess risk. The transition from phase 3 to phase 4, the active knowledge consumer, means you start evaluating the structural integrity of the field.
Meaning you aren't just categorizing theories anymore.
Right, you are questioning why certain experts disagree, you are finding the gaps in the filing cabinet. But the final leap to phase 5, the active knowledge producer, requires something the theorists call research resilience.
Research resilience. Huh. That sounds like a polite way of saying learning to get punched in the face intellectually and keep going.
Huh. That is a very accurate translation, actually. Becoming a producer means you stop treating knowledge as a static monument that you just stare at, and you start treating it as a dynamic, messy conversation.
And to join that conversation, you have to be willing to defend your independent judgment, even when it feels terrifying.
Exactly. You have to tolerate the discomfort of knowing your findings might contradict established literature and present them anyway.
Which sounds incredibly empowering in a vacuum, right? But here is the reality check. We don't operate in a vacuum. We operate in hierarchies.
We do.
We have bosses, we have mentors, we have academic supervisors. And trying to flex your new research resilience against someone who controls your grade or your paycheck seems like a great way to crash and burn.
This is exactly where the internal psychological shift violently collides with external authority. And honestly, it is where most people give up and revert back to being a student.
Let's talk about that collision, because Dr. Raymond Toga from the Da Vinci Institute wrote a fascinating guide on the realities of academic supervision, right?
He did, yes. He outlines how supervisors actually operate, and it is a brutal wake-up call for anyone expecting a traditional teacher to hold their hand.
And he has 5 realities, right? His first reality is that supervisors are not search engines.
Yeah. And this breaks the student mindset immediately. A student walks into a mentor's office and asks, "Which theory should I use for this project?"
Right, they expect the mentor to dispense the right answer.
But a good supervisor will never give you that answer. They will look at you and say, well, that depends entirely on how you frame your research question.
Which puts the cognitive load right back on your shoulders.
Mhm.
You have to do the heavy lifting of figuring out the framing. And that ties directly into his second reality, which is that they are not going to hold your hand.
Dr. Toga calls this the hidden curriculum. The explicit curriculum is the subject matter you are researching, the data, the interviews, the lab work.
But the hidden curriculum is the psychological burden of project ownership.
Exactly. Learning how to manage ambiguity, how to schedule your own intellectual deep dives, how to decide when a draft is good enough, that is the actual test.
But wait, if I am navigating all this ambiguity, and I go to my mentors for feedback, and one tells me to go left and the other tells me to go right, doesn't that just mean they're bad managers?
Not necessarily.
I mean, if they're giving me conflicting feedback, how am I supposed to succeed?
That is the third reality, and it is a massive paradigm shift.
Huh.
They are explicitly training you to handle ambiguity. Conflicting feedback is not a bug in the system, it is a feature.
A feature.
Yeah. In the student mindset, you view feedback as a set of instructions to execute. In the researcher mindset, conflicting feedback is an invitation to defend your own judgment.
Ah, so the goal isn't to appease both supervisors.
Right. The goal is to force you to evaluate their conflicting advice, make an independent decision on which path serves your data best, and then clearly articulate why you chose that path.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the natural instinct when you are confused is to just over-deliver and hope the mentor sorts it out.
Oh, yeah, we see that all the time.
The sources mention that students will often submit a massive 100-page draft to a supervisor without any context, just dropping it on their desk,
Yeah.
and then silence, crickets,
Yeah, the supervisor just doesn't respond.
and the student spirals, right?
Yeah.
Thinking, oh, my mentor hates me. I am failing. I have been abandoned.
When in reality, that silence is a test of Dr. Toga's fourth rule. They reward initiative, not obedience. A supervisor isn't a human grading machine.
Right, so if you drop a massive document on their desk without explaining what you are struggling with or what specific feedback you need, you are basically acting like a passive information gatherer.
Exactly. You are demanding they do the intellectual labor of figuring out what matters in your own work.
Which brings up a brilliant quote from Fengyu Kang at the Graduate Kingland Academic Annual Conference. He points out that the language we use with authority figures has to fundamentally change.
This is a crucial point, yeah.
The phrase can no longer be, what do you want me to do? You have to start using a new magic phrase, which is, here's my direction, what do you think?
That subtle shift in phrasing changes the entire psychological dynamic in the room. You stop acting like a subordinate waiting for orders, and you step into what psychologists call the adult state.
The adult state. So you are acknowledging your mentor's expertise by asking what they think, but you are anchoring the conversation in your own initiative.
Exactly. You are signaling that you believe your work has inherent value and direction before they even validate it.
And if that interaction stresses you out, Dr. Toga's fifth reality is a hard boundary. Your supervisor is not your therapist.
The transition from consumer to producer is emotionally exhausting. The imposter syndrome, the isolation, the sheer weight of the ambiguity, it takes a toll.
It really does.
But expecting the person who evaluates your intellectual output to also manage your emotional regulation is a recipe for disaster. That is why building a separate support system, whether it is peers, professional counselors, or outside mentors, is a non-negotiable part of the hidden curriculum.
So if you manage to navigate all of this, you stop asking for permission, you start setting your own direction, you are firmly in your adult state, you finally reach the edge of the map. And this is the part of the deep dive that I think is the most conceptually terrifying.
Because out on the cutting edge, you realize the ultimate secret. Nobody actually has the answers.
In school, the teacher always had an answer key hidden in the back of the textbook. But when you are truly producing original knowledge, that answer key just does not exist.
No, it doesn't.
The sources highlight a specific scenario that captures this perfectly. Imagine you were trying to decide between two very complex research methodologies. You were looking at interpretive phenomenological analysis, often called IPA, and grounded theory.
To give that some context, those are two profoundly different ways of looking at reality. If you choose IPA, you are deciding to deep dive into the lived psychological experience of a very small group of people.
Right, you are looking at how they personally make sense of an event.
Exactly. But if you choose grounded theory, you are looking at a broader set of data to build an entirely new theoretical framework from the ground up.
Right, so they are not just different tools, they change the entire fabric of what you're going to discover. And as someone trapped in the student mindset, your instinct is to run to your supervisor and ask, well, which one is the correct choice?
But the terrifying truth of the researcher mindset is that your supervisor doesn't know either. They can't know because the data hasn't been analyzed yet.
Exactly. They are entirely relying on you to look at your specific hyper-niche evidence, make a judgment call on whether IPA or grounded theory makes more sense, and then transparently defend why you made that choice.
Right, it is all on you.
I have to admit, to anyone listening, standing at the edge of that cliff with no map and a supervisor who is essentially saying, you figure it out, that sounds like a nightmare. If there's no map, and even the experts don't know the way, how do you know you aren't just failing or completely lost?
Well, this raises an important question about how we fundamentally define competence. In the proving paradigm we grew up in, being confused means you are failing.
Right. It means you didn't study hard enough.
But when you are operating at the boundary of human knowledge, being confused is not a bug in the system. It is the literal definition of doctoral competence.
Wait, being confused makes you competent.
Navigating that confusion makes you competent. The feeling of hitting a wall, of realizing that the information is incomplete and unknowable, and still choosing a methodology and moving forward anyway, that is the exact mechanism of growing as a scholar.
Oh, wow. Because if the path was clear and you already knew the answer, it wouldn't be research.
Exactly. It would just be a book report. The disorientation you feel isn't a sign of failure. It is the physiological sensation of generating new knowledge.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Whether you are prepping for a major presentation at work tomorrow morning or you are 3 years into a massive dissertation, the value you bring to the table changes the moment you shift your mindset from a passive consumer to an active producer.
It changes everything.
You have to stop waiting for someone to hand you a map with the right answer on it. The anxiety you feel when you look at that mountain of information isn't imposter syndrome. It is the realization that you are the explorer who has to draw the map.
And that transformation isn't confined to a laboratory or a university library. It is a cognitive habit that bleeds into how you engage with the world every single day.
Right.
So if the ultimate goal of learning is to reach that phase 5, the active knowledge producer phase, take a hard look at your daily media and reading habits.
Oh, that is a great point.
At what point in your daily life are you trapping yourself in cognitive passivity? Like, when are you going to sit back, doom scroll, and wait for an algorithm to tell you what to think about a topic? And more importantly, what is one small, uncomfortable step you could take today to start generating your own original insights, rather than just waiting for instructions?
It is time to realize that the mountain of information in front of you isn't there to intimidate you.